Salut, chat. Ai careva pe chat? Stai să... Oh, just kill. Uite un pic la pracul de aia. Care e petting de fapt? Că lucrează așa la mișto. Ținte aici, trebuie să ieși larg. Da, dacă ieși larg. Gen să rămâi și în diagonală, să ieși cumva. Spamul e asta. Dacă ești așa, poate te spamează asta de aici. Spama bine, băiat asta. L-avea pe ăsta bun. Da, n-ai dus să bun. Aici îl știam pe ăsta că vine. Pot să-l dăm în asta. Ce prost. Și de ce nu accelerează? Aici l-am zis să accelereze. Da. Asta intră înainte să explodeze. Care ești, mă, Jason? Nevermind, nu e asta. flash lele. Eu não flash. Proste, da. Da, care țin. Aynen. Am dat prost era. De-aia ajungeau ăștia și arată. Aici cred că puteam să bagi și să mă retrag. Hai bine, mă dădeam cu el direct. Deci acum nu era bun. Am blocat în amea cu aia. Eu am vrut să mă dau în spate. N-am știut, am crezut că m-am blocat în zi. N-am știut că e bobul lângă mine. Am vrut să mă dau în spate că știam că e mort. Ce-a făcut ăsta? Stă în bază să nu ia nade? Vreau să mă văd și eu flash-ul ăsta. sus ne ide, mati. Da. What the fuck? S-a forțat sau nu? Trec. Eu nu de am luat demo ăsta, am luat demo ăsta pentru că se joacă online, nu se joacă pe LAN. Am luat ultimul demo online. Dau prin. Lol. Cu un fel de daneido. Păi nu-l dau eu așa? Ce mă complic eu cu lovitul de balama? Așa-l dau mă, coaie. Apiși pe el. Mă complic eu cu line-up, nebun. Uite, la 1.45, bobu. 1.44 chiar, lol. Nu, de 1.45 trebuie să-l dai. Asta l-a dat prea late. Ăștia trec prin 1.46 trebuie să-l dai. Și ăsta care moli rampa și după aia simplu line-up-ul ăsta. Dacă nu-l dă când treia. Anti-lane. Așa ar trebui să numim asta. Îi dau unul tău. E simplu. 50 de metri. Și aici retake la Cheetah. Nimic complicat, cu aia. Ăștia au zis mult și au zis că vine și flash. Mamă, ce le-a făcut. Mamă, ce le-a făcut animalele astea. dă și așa. Bine cum are chef. Cum faci asta cu mâna așa? Mă buc de la deau. Mai și schimb. Funcție de cine are spawn. Ok. Cine are spawn dă nade lane. Molly și nade lane. Unde-i cam? Spawn-ul 2. Trebuie să știm amândoi aparent. Lol, chiar merge schema asta. Destinata de ea. Care animalele astea? Mamă, pleci. Acolo spamează asta. Ce unde spamează asta? Da, spamează acolo. Aici. Lol. Așa se uită Zadu, dacă pică, că nu-i de ăsta, e handicapat sau asta. Ce mă gândesc să dau play singur. Ce animal. Asta la Nico aici. Doamne, ce faci? Self-made. Trebuie să ții minte flash asta. E destul de bun pentru un pic. Rampă la el. Aici. Asta e mai bun. Să-mi dau line. Ah, lol. E pentru că nu stau. Patru, 6, da. Pleci la... Și imediat la 44. Au dormit. Lol, e la rundă. Bă, cum a bătut ăsta timing-ul? Ce spawn avea? Primul spawn, ok. Cât de repede poți să fac. Bine, aici am murit. Să băgat ăștia. Asta ar fi reacție. Deci cine de să mă comporți? Polară. A, polarul ne dă să mă comport și ne agresăm pe unul. Se agresează mine. Hai, spânzătoare. E o băganie de asta. Dar asta spawn mai bun. Ești în funcție cine are spawn mai bun de lane. Ce fac, mă? Flash play in mid din donut? LOL. Ce a făcut, mă, polarul ăsta? Sau e polar? Da, mă, polar. S-a handicapat. Flash mai bune, coi. Deci cum e flash ăsta? Acolo, aici. Asta e că și să dă flash. Am serverul băgat.
Connected.
Câteva chestii de... Deci, practic, câteva flash-uri, câteva utilități de... Nu le știam. Asta e un flash. Shallow. Era mai deep. Crezi că e mai deep. În fine, ideea e că pică spatele lor. Deci practic ăla e... Asta e bun pentru... Asta care se bate aici. Nu înțeles. Bun. Deci se dau altfel. În fine, îl dau oricum. Îl dau așa. Și asta. Sau îl dau. Da, mă. Așa-l dă câteodată. După ce dăm molotov. Da, un nade ăsta. Încădere. Da, molotov. Ok. Și molotov. Era gen asta. Ia așa-l. Vine aici. Sau nu mai larg. Și heu. E simplu de dat heul ăsta. Bam, și le pun asta albastru. E dacă pot un bot. Nu iată cât de aici. Cam 39, mă. E bun că merge sus aici. Aici sigur e unul. Ce are bobos? Își dă molotovul. Bă, molotovul ăsta e bun. Lasă am atitudinea tot să fix. Cred că e bun. Dai molotovul ăsta. Și l-ai bătut. Așa, mă. Îi dau unei de aici dacă vreau. Deci prima dată dau bam și bam. Și după aia dau bobo de astea. Bă, unde era, mă? Mă fi, mă găsește el. Asta. Fapt are sens. Flash-ul ăsta de trebuie să-i arăt lui Max. Un fel de flash de asta. Doar că ești mult mai rapid în B. Așa. Flash-ul ăsta de self-pick. Smoke asta de trebuia să știi oricum. Numai că aparent dau flash ăsta. Bă, da, nu pică bine smoke. Așa e, mă. Ce mă arată. Mă la dreapta.
Smoke. Flashbang. Throwing smoke. Throwing flashbang. Deploying flashbang.
Așa. Era un flash de aici. Aparent.
Throwing flashbang.
Poți să-l dai și așa. Sau? Poți să-l dai și așa.
Flashbang.
Poziție safe.
Deploying flashbang.
Nu am gândit eu să spawnez aici. Bun. Ce mai văzăm de asta? Mai văzut ceva?
Laying down smoke.
Unde-mi cuțitul?
Throwing flashbang.
Ia și ăsta flash. A, asta de jos nu e. Deci se dă combo.
Flashbang.
Deci v-am Bobo își dă moli rampă.
Throwing fire. Grenade out.
Mai e pe aici. Încă moliul meu.
Throwing fire. Grenade.
Bă.
Throwing a grenade.
Oricum aud dacă stinge sau nu. Dacă nu stinge stau aici. Flash. Spawn. Flash. A, poate se care.
Incendiary.
Molly.
Grenade out.
Smoke.
Throwing smoke.
Flash.
Deploying flashbang.
Sau insta. Insta smoke.
Incendiary out.
Molly.
Grenade.
Eight. Oh.
Incendiary. Throwing a grenade. Deploying flashbang.
Hmm.
Grenade out. Flashbang.
Deci,
Grenade out. Throwing fire. Throwing a grenade. Throwing flashbang.
și Max zice că vine. Cara pe mid. Ce cara
Throwing
e?
fire. Grenade out. Deploying flashbang. Throwing flashbang.
Și anti-rush la B. Ar fi
Incendiary out. Grenade.
flash.
Flashbang.
Este aici car. Calca de bine.
Throwing fire. Grenade out. Throwing flashbang. Deploying flashbang.
A, deci dacă îl dau mai jos,
Flashbang.
e cam altfel flash ăsta. Mă depinde cât de tare îl dau.
Deploying flashbang.
Plică prea jos, nu e bine. Bă, mersi de sub. Cine ești la sub?
Disconnected.
Nu știu cine ești la sub. Dar mersi de sub.
Flashbang.
O să fie un flash de asta mai nebun.
Throwing flashbang. Deploying flashbang.
Aia e flash-ul ăsta.
Flashbang. Throwing
Până
flashbang.
dacă se deraște.
Deploying flashbang.
Dacă îl dau mai așa.
Stop, you have killed your own.
De ce este de... Help. Throw index. Delay. Delay. Ah, ok.
Yes.
Se zice că în prim molly. În fine. Delay. Delay 0. Asta și eu să mă feresc. Mă uit oricum lung. Trebuie să dau așa. E bine cum mă bag cu ei.
I'm throwing a flashbang. Flashbang.
Trebuie să găsesc un bounce ceva de bun. Să nu știe în ce direcție să se ferească.
Throwing a flashbang.
Cred că așa fac să iasă pe asta pe lung. Dacă îl dau un alt aici.
I'm throwing a flashbang. Throwing a flashbang.
Îl dau jos aici. Focus long. Și nu e niciun flash. Îi dau flash-ul și ies cu el.
Flashbang.
Cred că așa fac.
I'm throwing a flashbang. I'm throwing a flashbang. Flashbang.
În fine. Mă gândeam ce flash-uri să dau. Asta de mie există de el. Așa dacă spre prea jos nu le iau. Trebuie să le dau mai înalte.
Throwing a flashbang.
Până în flash.
Flashbang.
La deadmatch. Bă, nici măcar nu-i tot. Toată map. Am bătut pe ăla din spatele ăla. Am uitat un pic pe Nico. Nu m-aș așa că la tap. E nebunul. Bot Daniel. Cum are bot Daniel scorul ăsta? Ah, mă bătă pe mine. Dar n-am și eu un server mai ca lumea. Cyber șuche. Da, vreau să bag podcastul ăla, mă, de zis Stico de el. Ia să ascult podcastul ăla. Crezi că ce zice băiatul ăsta?
I think
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here, and I'm here with Jocko Willink of Extreme Ownership, How U.S. Navy SEALs Lead and Win. I'm really excited to read this because I really enjoyed your podcast with Tim Ferriss. And I've seen you around the UFC a bunch of times, but I didn't know much about you. But you're one of those dudes, you know, where I look at this guy, I'm like, that guy probably knows some shit. There's just something about you, like when I see you, you know, you're hanging around with Lister. I saw you a few times at the UFC. I'm like, that guy probably knows some shit, or he's seen some shit. And then I saw or listened to the Tim Ferriss podcast, and I go, okay, well, that makes a lot of sense now. If you haven't heard that podcast, it is excellent. And you're the first guy ever to come with your own notepad and your own pen, too. I just want to point that out.
Just trying to be prepared.
Well, that's your whole thing, man. I'm a big fan of your social media posts, too, because I like feeling like a lazy fuck whenever I look at your social media posts and you have a picture of your watch, 4:45 in the morning. This dude's out there working out. I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you know, I obviously had zero social media presence like 3 months ago or whatever the case may be. And Tim Ferriss was, you know, basically said, hey, you need to get on this social media stuff. And I said, okay, can you kind of show me what to do? And he says, yeah, sign up. So then I signed up, and then he dropped that podcast that gets listened to by a bunch of people. And all of a sudden I was engulfed in the social media world. And I found Twitter to be the one that was the easiest to use, and you don't have to write a lot. So, you know, I don't like people that talk a whole bunch without saying anything. So I figured that one's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was thinking when he was encouraging you to use social media. I was like, a guy like you're not a peacocker, you know? And there's something about social media that, as a person who's an avid social media user, there's some peacocking to it, you know? And I try to do it with humor, and I try to, because it's an important aspect of promoting comedy shows and podcasts and things along those lines. But you were much more of a keep it to yourself. One of the things that I loved about the Ferriss podcast, you were talking about how you would have commanders would come to various leaders and ask them, what do you need? What do you need? And guys would have all these requests and all these things. We need Wi-Fi. We need this. And you were like, we're good, sir. We're good, sir. And the idea behind that is when you did need something, if you really did need something, someone would come to you.
Yeah,
and you would get it quickly.
Absolutely. When I needed something and I spoke up and said, hey, boss, this is what I need and this is why I need it, they would instantly give it to me because they knew that I was telling the truth, that it wasn't some, you know, half-ass request that wasn't real. It was something that we legit needed, and they'd give it to me.
Well, this is the value of someone who keeps their words short and means what they say and says what they mean and doesn't have a lot of bullshit involved in their vocabulary or in. And this is coming from a professional bullshitter. I mean, this is what I do. I bullshit. I talk, you know. Fill a lot of hours of just shooting the shit about nonsense.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to, you know, look in the mirror myself. I mean, I just wrote with my partner, Leif Babin, who I served with, you know, we just wrote a 300-page book about us, you know, for all practical purposes. Now, of course, it's about our team and it's about what we learned and what we experienced, but there's no doubt that there's some level of, you know, self-promotion when you're writing a book that's got your name on the cover of it. And now I'm sitting here talking to you, and I guess that puts me in the same league. Maybe not the same league, but at least I'm playing the same sport.
Yeah, we're definitely playing the same sport. But there's benefit to that, because I think what you have to say, and especially what you had to say in the Tim Ferriss podcast, is very important. It's not just important, it's unique. And because your perspective is of one who was involved in the most intense activity a human being can participate in today's world. You were involved in combat in Iraq during the worst time of the war, and you came through it with some pretty intense lessons. And I think anybody listening to that podcast can get a lot out of it. There's inspiration to be gotten from that podcast for sure, but there's also an understanding that can only be, I don't think anybody else can relay what you experienced but you. You know, you can have all these guys that write these, you know, movies, and they could write screenplays and television shows about it, or guys can write books about it, embedded journalists can write about it. It's not the same. It's not the same. I got a sense from just you talking about it on Tim Ferriss' podcast, literally a shift in my perspective of what it's like to be there.
Yeah. It is, you know, for me, it was and I know this might sound weird, but it was my lifelong dream to be in combat and to be in a leadership position in combat.
Da, mă, atunci mai la ăla, Tim Ferris.
Microphone check. Jocko, how are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Feeling splendid, especially given this cocktail of adrenaline that you've been feeding me.
Optimal minimal.
At this altitude, I can run flat out for a half mile before my hands start shaking.
Can I answer your personal question?
Now would seem an appropriate time.
I'm a cybernetic organism.
So it is massively disruptive Wealthfront, and this is a very unique sponsor. Wealthfront is a massively disruptive, in a good way, set it and forget it investing service.
That better.
What type of training would you suggest for people? What type of regimen? What might a workout or a week look like for someone who wants to, let's just say a male, 25 years old, who wants to add lean mass? What would you
Deadlift and squat.
Deadlift and squat.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the universal answer, right?
Yeah.
Does anyone say anything different when you ask that question?
I don't ask many people, but you have such an incredible range of weight over that period of time that I had to ask. I mean, I think that is the right answer. I think the eating is a lot harder than the training in some respects, at least for me. I mean, I got up to, I'm walking around about 175 right now, but I did to beat a friend in a bet, which didn't even involve money, so I'm not sure why I subjected myself to this, but I got up to like 215. The eating was the harder component.
I remember being on a deployment on a ship, and so the food on the ship is not good. You know, you're on a 6-month deployment on a ship, and I was a SEAL, and when you're on a ship as a SEAL, you don't have a job other than just to work out. This is especially, in the 90s, so this is a totally different world. The dry years, because there's no war going on. And I remember, we were all just trying to get huge, and I remember getting plates full of chicken McNuggets or whatever brand they serve in the Navy. And I would just be sitting there at a table, for 40 minutes after chow was done being served. And I'm just looking at these chicken nuggets and hating them and putting them in my mouth and forcing them down in order to gain weight. So, yeah. It's stupid.
Stupid, but requires dedication. And
yeah.
there's something to be said for...
to use one of your terms, I'm a world-class chicken nugget eater when I need to be.
Let's talk about the MMA, and then we're going to come back to military. When did you first get exposed to jiu-jitsu or martial arts?
So I'm on my first deployment, 1992 or 1993, and I'm in Guam, and there's an old SEAL Master Chief named Steve Bailey, and he was kind of known as a badass. In fact, he was known as a badass, and the reason he was known as a badass is because he was a badass. And so this is pre-UFC. No one knows anything. And he has been training for a year or something with the Gracies up in Torrance. And he took a bunch of us new guys and said, hey, does anyone want to learn how to fight? And, of course, absolutely want to learn how to fight, myself and a couple other guys. And, he was like a high-level white belt, maybe even a medium-level white belt, but it's 1993.
Right,
no one knows
all
anything.
new.
So, he taught us, the rear naked choke, the arm lock, how to escape the mount, and possibly an Americana.
Yeah.
And
posting on the chest into
right. And
straight
so
arm lock.
with those moves, and there's a lot of, being in the SEAL teams, you're constantly, it's an environment where there's lots of escalations, in a platoon. And so you're constantly scrapping and wrestling and fighting and, that's part of it. And so, but with these basic maneuvers that I learned, I could do well, and it was badass. So that's when I started it. And then I didn't really didn't really have the vision, I thought that it was
you couldn't see where it would go.
I thought it was a finite thing. Mm-hmm. I know these 7 moves. Everyone that's stepped up to me now, I've been able to handle. I'm good. I'm good. Right. And it wasn't until one of my other buddies, who was a SEAL, who was in that initial pack with me, a guy by the name of Jeff Higgs, and he had gotten out of the SEAL teams, and he had just dedicated himself to training jiu-jitsu. And one day he came to my house, and we were even when we were both idiots, right? And then he came to my house one day, and he says, "Hey, you want to train?" And I said, "Well, yeah, absolutely." So we went over in the grass across the street from my house, and he had just gotten his purple belt. So you can imagine a purple belt in 1995.
Yeah.
I mean, he
Unusual.
was just completely beyond, anything I knew. He tapped me out 1,000 times, and I said, "Hey, where are you training? Give me the place." And that was it. Went down the next day and signed up for unlimited classes, and I took 3 classes a day until the present time.
3 classes a day.
Yeah, I mean, I would just go during lunch. I'd go to the beginner class. I'd go to the advanced class. I would just get after it.
And who was he training with? Do you recall who he was training?
Fabio Santos.
Fabio Santos. And let's flash forward to the current day. Who are the primary teachers you've trained with, and what's the current status of your jiu-jitsu and training?
Well, my long story short, myself and Dean Lister, we ended up not being with Fabio anymore, and we ended up kind of going out on our own. Dean went out on his own. I mean, I was an active duty SEAL, so I wasn't a full-time jiu-jitsu guy, but I was a full-time main training partner for Dean. And so we left, and we ended up going to a couple different schools, and eventually opened a big gym down in San Diego. And we have Dean Lister and Jeff Glover are our primary instructors.
What's the name of the school?
Victory MMA.
Victory MMA. And what was your experience opening a business as an active SEAL? How did your military experience help or hinder that?
I'd say it was the typical stuff. Hey, okay, let's figure out what the plan is going to be. How are we going to put it together? It was opening a gym. We weren't, planning. we weren't
building a railroad.
It was a lot less than even planning a regular SEAL mission. In a lot of ways, which again, planning SEAL missions is no high intellectual task either. I mean, you got bad guys, you're going to go kill them. That's not super advanced. And of course, there's technology and timelines and all that, but it's not rocket science. And so we did a good job and opened up a big space and teach a bunch of jiu-jitsu.
So, okay, got it. So as far as sort of tactical implementation, not the most complex thing that you've done. What would you put on the higher level end of complexity in terms of things that you've spearheaded or had to tackle up to this point in your
there's 2 types of complexity that we could talk about here. There's the actual complexity of the mission, which again, generally is not going to be super complex. But what is complex is that you're dealing with human beings who have, all these variables, emotions and problems and issues and egos. And that's the complexity in anything. And so that's, from a leadership perspective, that's what I've found to be always the more challenging thing. That's always the more challenging thing, is dealing with people and getting people to, conduct operations or carry out missions in a way that is most efficient, most effective, especially when, they could get killed doing it. And, you're asking guys to do things that are very, very dangerous, where they know they could die. And so that's what's complex. And it transfers over to the business world, where you've got to get, a group of people. It's the same thing. You've got to get a group of people to carry out a mission, and that, in the most efficient and effective manner. So they both have that in common. And I think that is usually the more complex piece, is the leadership of human beings.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's makes me think of, I guess, Customato, who worked with Tyson for so long and really took him to his first world championship belt. He said, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face. And I think that when you have something that's very simple on paper, but there are a lot of unknown or uncontrollable variables, the plan is just a starting point. But then you have to adjust in the field. And obviously when the stakes are as high as they are, when you were deployed, I can see how that would be infinitely complex, potentially, depending on how sideways things go. How did you become a SEAL? What's the story of you becoming a SEAL?
Well, I grew up in New England, and I actually grew up in a little town in the sticks of New England, and I was kind of a rebellious kid. In fact, I was a pretty significantly rebellious kid, and I know it seems counterintuitive, but when you grow up in New England, one of the most rebellious things that a human being can do is join the military. And almost the ultra rebellious thing you could do, because it's very you know, I grew up with a bunch of hippies. You know,
Yeah,
the
sure.
kids were hippies. They were deadheads. They were smoking pot, and I was not into that. And I was so they thought they were rebellious because they were smoking pot and doing acid and
Right.
whatnot. And I don't know. You tell me who was more rebellious, because I ended up becoming a commando for my whole life.
I think the sort of pot and hacky sack scene. I've spent a lot of time in Vermont and New Hampshire. That
Exactly.
seems kind of par for the course. It's like sort of conformist rebellion. But the and what was the path that you took then? So it was at what point did you enlist?
So I actually, 1989, and Panama happened. The invasion of Panama happened, and 4 SEALs were killed there. And when I saw that in the paper, I was, I guess the word would be ashamed that I was not there. You know, the Vietnam War was over, so we weren't seeing headlines all the time. And all of a sudden, there's guys that were dying for our country, and I was not there. And right after that, I went down to the recruiting station and said I wanted to be a SEAL.
And what happens after that?
So then, you know, I went to boot camp, which is Navy boot camp. Got done with boot camp.
And is boot camp is separate from buds?
It is separate. And then you go to a school where you learn a Navy trade, and then you start buds. So started buds in, I think it was April of 1991. So this was right after the Gulf War. So from my perspective, leading up to the Gulf War, there were some reports, I remember hearing them on the news. They're saying there's going to be 40,000 casualties in the first 24 hours. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember that.
I don't remember that.
I remember that because I was in the military and I was going to SEAL training.
I was in China when I saw the announcement on television.
So here I am thinking, okay, this is going to be, I'm going to get some. You know, I'm going to go to war. You know, all these guys are going to get hurt, injured, killed, and I'm going to go to war. And the war kicks off, and 72 hours later, it's over, and I hadn't even started SEAL training yet. So I was, you know, pretty bummed out. I know that sounds crazy, but, you know, I was pretty bummed out because that's what I wanted to do with my life, was be in combat and be some kind of warrior. And now the chance had just dissipated in 72 hours. But, you know, it was the reality of what was happening. So went to SEAL training, went through, and went over to SEAL Team 1.
And in, let's say, boot camp, just for people listening and for myself, quite frankly, who are not familiar with what happens in these different phases, what is the objective of boot camp in the case of the boot camp that you attended, and then buds, for instance? Because I think a lot of people are familiar with the term like Hell Week, and they think of buds as a disqualifying phase, right? The objective is to weed out the people who aren't suitable for combat or leadership or fill in the blank. But what are the objectives of boot camp?
So boot camp is to get turn a civilian into a military human. Mm-hmm. And, you know, they teach you all this basic stuff. I'd say the key thing that they teach you in Navy boot camp is attention to detail. So you've got to do all these tasks, because if you're in the Navy, you're working on an aircraft, and if you make a mistake working on the aircraft, people die. So it's very attention to detail oriented, and they just teach you the basic structure of the military and imprint that on your brain.
Right.
And then SEAL training is what you said it is. It's weeding people out.
And what is say, incoming, and I apologize, I'm going to massacre the terminology here, but of the incoming class, how many people go into buds and how many people make it out the other end?
It's about an 80% attrition rate.
80% attrition, so 20% make it through.
Yep.
And do you have to ring a bell? Is that an actual thing? How does that work? Can you describe the...
Yeah, they have a bell, and if you want to quit, you can quit at any time. And if you want to quit, you walk over to this bell that they carry on all the runs, and they have it in the back of a truck. And if you want to quit, you go over and ring the bell, and then you're done.
Then you're done. What did you find most challenging personally in the buds training, if anything?
You know, the thing with buds is, you know, I was not good at anything. I wasn't great at anything. I couldn't run fast. I couldn't swim fast. But I was, like, okay at everything, which is actually better because...
You didn't have a single failure point.
I didn't have these areas of weakness, of huge weakness. Now, again, I was not... believe me, I'm not saying I was great at anything, because I really wasn't. I'd finish the middle of the pack on a run or the middle of the pack of a swim. There were some guys, you know, a couple guys that I remember that were at the other end of the spectrum. We had a guy that played, you know, college NCAA water polo, and he was a phenomenal athlete. And he quit because he couldn't get through the obstacle course. I had another guy in my class that was an Olympic gymnast alternate, and he quit because the water, doing the stuff in the water got to him. So for me, luckily, I grew up in the water, and I grew up in New England, so I was used to the cold. That didn't do anything to me, and all you had to do was get the passing and put out as hard as you can. Like for the runs, I had to run as hard as I could to pass the runs. It was a sprint because you couldn't modulate. You didn't know how long the runs really were. They'd say they were 4 miles, but you had no idea what they were actually going to be. So you just had to run as hard as you possibly could. That's what I had to do.
Right. That's got to be quite a mind trip. I mean, to start a run when it's not a primary strength and know you have to go all out without having any idea of the length.
Well, you'd know it was going to be around
roughly
4 miles. I don't want to make it sound like we had no idea, but it was, it'd be 4.5 miles, 4 3/4 miles or whatever.
Did the people who made it through, the 20% who made it through Buds, did the people who showed the most promise in Buds end up performing best in the field?
Not necessarily, because Buds is a much more athletic event. You know, it's about athleticism. A lot of it is also don't quit. And I hear some people say everybody thinks about quitting during SEAL training, and I absolutely did not think about quitting at any time. There was nothing. If they could have killed me, and it would have been fine, but I definitely wasn't going to quit. But when you get to the SEAL team, there were some guys that were studs athletically, but they were not great SEALs when they got to teams. And there's also guys that are studs athletically that were studs in the SEAL teams. So it's hard to put a scientific answer around that one.
Yeah, we'll come back to the training because I loved talking about any types of commonalities or patterns that you've spotted in a couple of different areas. But I'm going to ask you about the Battle of Ramadi, but I want to first ask, where did you get this mental toughness? So this not thinking of quitting, even if it killed you, was that developed through athletics as a kid, through something else? Is your entire family like that? I mean, where did that come from? Where did that drive and stick-to-itiveness come from?
I'm not 100% sure. Some of it, I remember, my dad was definitely, you're not allowed to quit at anything ever. So that leaves a mark, right?
Sure.
Also, I think that, I grew up and I started listening to, hardcore music, and I had a hardcore attitude. And so I think that growing up under that influence, that and watching war movies and, a product of that, of that influence, of those mantras that you'd hear in some hardcore song that's about, getting after it. And I think that left a mark as well.
Could you describe the Battle of Ramadi and explain what that is for people who may not even recognize the name Ramadi?
So the Battle of Ramadi. So Ramadi is a city in western Iraq, in a state or a province called Al-Anbar province, which is the largest province in Iraq. And Ramadi is the capital city. And the Battle of Ramadi that I fought in was in 2006. And at that time, many of the insurgents had been pushed out of Baghdad. Many of them had been pushed out of Fallujah because the Marine Corps did a very substantial effort through Fallujah and cleared it out. And a lot of those enemy had gone to Ramadi. So in the summer of 2006, the epicenter of the insurgency was in Ramadi. And so that's where my SEAL task unit deployed to, and that's where we fought.
How long were you there?
We were there for 6 months.
For 6 months. How would you describe that experience to people? And I know that's a very broad question, but for lack of a better way to approach it, because I mean we can really peel back the layers. But when people ask you what was that like, how do you answer that?
Well, for one thing, it was my second deployment to Iraq. So my first deployment to Iraq was all completely different in that the insurgency hadn't been really truly established yet. And we, as a country, this is 2003, 2004, and so we were doing very well, at least everyone thought we were. And we were winning. And, you know, I always talk about that deployment like we were rock stars, because we'd, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, we'd drive out of the gate and go capture a bad guy and bring him back at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it was like we were rock stars, you know. We had such a tactical advantage over the enemy, and it was just pretty easy. Mm-hmm. We always worked with SEALs only. It was just easy. Tough, of course. I shouldn't say easy, but it was less challenging. And on that deployment, it was like we won everything, and we felt great. You know, we felt great about what we did. We felt like we accomplished our mission. And, you know, if those were the challenges of combat, as an individual, I felt like I did a good job.
Right. You were well equipped.
I did a good job, and my platoon did a good job. We did a good job. And it seemed like we passed a test, you know, like, because, you know, at that time, we hadn't had sustained combat operations for a long time in the SEAL teams. So we felt pretty badass. So now you fast forward to Ramadi in 2006. It is completely different. There are insurgents that actually control a majority of the city. They have complete freedom to maneuver. They are terrorizing, and I don't use that term lightly. They are terrorizing. They are skinning people alive. They are beheading people. They're doing what you see on TV right now with ISIS. They're doing that. The civilian population is horrified, and there are 30 to 50 enemy attacks a day in the city of Ramadi. There are Route Michigan, which is a road that ran from east to west through Ramadi, which was loosely controlled by Americans, would have 7 to 10 IED attacks a day. So this is statistically the most IED'd road in all of Iraq, and it's 3 miles long.
Improvised explosive device?
Improvised explosive device.
Yep.
So these are roadside bombs that completely caused the majority of casualties in the war in Iraq. And so we get there, you know, the buildings are rubbled out. The buildings have bullet holes in them. There's wrecked vehicles on the streets. There's giant craters in the streets from IEDs. And on top of all that, on an almost daily basis, you're going to some kind of a memorial ceremony for an American soldier or an American Marine that's been killed in combat. And we rolled into that, and right away I knew this is a completely different situation, and we are going to fight a completely different type of battle here.
Were in this case, I mean, looking at your opponents, were they better trained, or did they just have a sort of territorial and movement advantage that made it more difficult for you guys?
They had both.
They had both.
They had both. So there was a former military base, former Iraqi military base. So you had a lot of former regime people there, former soldiers that were there. They definitely controlled the terrain without question. They were allowed to fight in a completely different way than us. And by that I mean they have no rules.
Right.
So you're fighting against someone that has no rules, and you know, they don't care about collateral damage. We are very careful about collateral damage. They don't care.
Just to define that, you mean taking out civilians, people who are...
Civilian casualties means nothing to them. Destroying a building means nothing to them. Killing each other. So accidentally shooting or suicide bombers. I mean, there were suicide bombers on the regular in Ramadi. And so they have no rules. And so that gave them an advantage as well. Now, tactically, they did what we did. So, for example, you know, if we get into a bad firefight, we'll call for reinforcements. Reinforcements will come to help us. We would watch them do the exact same thing. If we had someone get wounded, we would call for a casualty evacuation. They'd come and pick them up and take them back to the field medical facility. We would watch them do the exact same thing. So they had communications, they had plans, they would hit with complex attacks that would be coordinated throughout the city. So at one time, they would attack 3 or 4 different coalition outposts in the city or on the outskirts of the city, all coordinated not only amongst themselves, so the separate attacks would be coordinated, but the individual attacks would be coordinated where they were vicious. Usually ending, starting with machine gun fire and then rocket-propelled grenades, and then their goal always was to get a suicide vehicle bomb, and drive it right into the compound and detonate and kill as many people as possible. And they did this on the regular.
In that type of... So what was your unit? What was your unit known as?
SEAL Team 3 Task Unit Bruiser.
And how many people were in that unit?
So in that unit, you got about 35 SEALs. And then we have another 70 support people. So these are people that, help us fix our vehicles, get our intelligence, man our radios, and all that. So you got about a pretty big contingent of support people. They're not SEALs, they're SEAL support.
Got it. So about roughly like 100, 105 people in total. Do those 35 SEALs, do they all directly report to you?
So of those 35 SEALs, there's 2 SEAL platoons with, 16 guys each. And then we have a small headquarters element, myself and a couple other guys.
Got it. And that was the most decorated special operations unit in the Iraq War.
It was.
What separates a good commander from a great commander in an environment like that?
Out of the gate, my immediate answer is humility, because you're in a situation like that. There's no way that you know everything. It's not possible. And so you have to be humble enough to, reach out, ask people for advice. There'd been conventional units, so big army units, on the ground for years. And when we got there, there'd been a unit on the ground, the 228 Iron Soldiers from Pennsylvania. I'm just giving them some props right now because they were awesome. And they'd been on the ground for 14 months fighting. So we went to those guys and we, said, okay, how can we help? What can we do? What advice do you have for us? We wanted to learn what they knew. And I think that was a big piece of it. And also, I had an open mind when it came to the strategic mission that we were trying to accomplish. Because for many years, what SEALs and Special Operations and the conventional units were doing was going out into neighborhoods, grabbing bad guys, and coming back to their bases. And after 3 years of that, the enemy attacks had gone up 300%. So clearly something was not working. And the brigade that came in and took over, again, I'm going to give some huge compliments to the 11 AD under Colonel Sean McFarland. They came in with a amazing strategy, which was seize, clear, hold, and build, which meant you got these bad neighborhoods that are owned by the enemy. And, okay, we're going to go in there, and we're going to stay there. And that was a very different strategy than anyone had used. And so...
That's the seize.
That's the what? The seize, clear, hold, and build. So you go into these enemy territories, and you actually take over a building or 2 buildings or 3 buildings, and you make them your house, make them your fort. And so that's what we did. And again, so from my perspective... for Colonel McFarland and the rest of the battalion commanders and all those commanders to have this open mind to try out a completely new strategy, which was very, very dangerous.
Very dangerous. I mean, I'm not an expert. That sounds very risky.
It was extremely risky, and there was a huge price was paid. The casualties were very significant and very horrifying.
Now, despite that overall, was that an effective strategy?
It absolutely was.
That was just the price that it exacted.
It absolutely was. So by the time I left, the strategy we hadn't seen the results yet. I left October 21st, 2006. And there was still about 30 to 50 enemy attacks a day. About 5 months after we left, the enemy attacks were down to 1 a day, 2 a day.
From what was the previous?
From 30 to 50.
Wow.
And then 6 months later, it was down to 1 a week, and then 1 a month, and then soon, by 2007, Ramadi was the safest place in Iraq. I mean, if excluding maybe the Kurd-controlled area up in the north.
And do you attribute that to anything else outside of this this stratagem, the C's. I'm apologizing that I'm forgetting the others, but occupying these buildings or areas and making them your home for a period of time. Were there other tactical decisions or strategies that contributed to that decrease?
So obviously the other huge piece of this is the men and women that were fighting, and God bless them all, because it was a hell of a fight. And like I said, there was significant casualties. And the other focus now was to take back the neighborhoods and in that secure the populace. So in other wars, you say, okay, here's our strategic objective is to take this hill or take this airfield or what have you. In this one, the strategic goal was to secure the populace, to make sure that the populace was safe. Because once the populace was safe, then it was, okay, now we're going to give you some food, we're going to give you some water. We have Iraqi troops with us, so we worked all the time with Iraqi troops, and they're speaking the same language, and it took a very short amount of time before that barrier got broken down, and the local populace of Ramadi turned against the insurgents because they were no longer feared them. And so that was the other huge tipping point, was getting the local populace of Ramadi on the side of the coalition.
I imagine that would give you, an enormous informational advantage. Also.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you have humility and openness to modifying pre-existing strategies, but then there's also an experimental piece. It sounds like. I mean, how was the first experiment conducted, or how did it come to pass and be implemented that you would go in and occupy and test out that particular approach? Because it seems like, were there other experiments like that? And I know I just asked two questions, but I'm just trying to figure out in a military structure, and I haven't been exposed to that, where I'm sure there's a lot of command structures in place. Were you given a lot of latitude to experiment in that way, or did it require a lot of process?
So let me give you I'll try and give a concise answer.
Doesn't have to be concise.
But this is, you're going deep right now.
Oh, yeah.
Which is fine. Because I guess it's your podcast. So I'll take it back to a place called Al-Qaim, where the Marines did a big sweep through Al-Qaim, and at some point when they went through Al-Qaim, the local populace started saying, hey, there's bad guys over there. Hey, there's bad guys in that building down there. Go get them too. So there was a little thought about that. Now there was a place in north of Ramadi called Tal Afar, which there's a great legendary army commander, and I'll have to, McMaster's. And I got to look that up because I think I'm missing it.
Yeah, that's okay. And people in the show notes can also they can also do some
H.C.
research.
McMaster, the guy's legendary guy, but he ran this seize, clear, and hold strategy up in Tal Afar, and it was very effective. And again, this is pre-surge. That was 2005, 2006. Colonel McFarland went and took over for him in Tal Afar and saw, got the turnover and understood what had happened. And then Colonel McFarland got the task, once McMaster left, to come down to Ramadi. And he said, I'm going to do the same thing there. And so that's what he did. And, it was, one thing that's interesting is it's not a move.
But the cure is life. Rigata. Entrenamiento. Fuck just now. Bun, ajunge.
V.
T-main.
Hai bomba aici.
Te creded.
Bravo! Omori frate,
Last might be on A, take him from A.
I need help. I will come outside with bomb.
Cine joacă hard? Asta, să dăm. IGM.
Waiting for you, bro. I'm going heaven. Heaven.
Wow.
Doamne, cum să mă duc cu o grenadă cu aia?
Dar nu văd cu cine joacă.
Da, am dat, sunt afară.
Sebastian. Cine e Sebastian?
Unde uiți?
E ca și cu Dacia.
Am smoke-uri la red?
Da. Mergi?
E garaj.
One is on hut, one is on hut.
Garaj.
One on hut.
Hai, că am luat. Nou la roșie, sus.
Sticker, nu neapărat că aveam sticker, dar... Unde uiți? Bine.
Păi, ce...
Ha?
Cum îi zice... Ce rezoluție deci?
Nu e doar 180 până la 160. Stretch.
Nu știu de ce. Vezi?
Bă, nu mi-a Rusie cumpărat un receiver separat? Ce tare. Bă, nu ne-a dat nimic pe site. N-am câștigat deloc, dar timpul ăla. Bă, uitați-vă de cum stăm în queue.
Mai vrea să joace Dacia.
Sound muted. Microphone muted.
Păi ești nebun, ăsta 20 de minute în queue.
Știu, dă simple la fel. Yes.
Am dat kick. E Dacia Blue.
Ce vrei să vrei să bag?
Hai, să-mi dau. Da, mă, la double. Gata.
Ai ratat, îi dau.
Ăsta radio, bă.
Un vent.
Uite-i bombă. Ești.
Vent clear. He didn't drop them.
Rush fight.
I open door on B. On single.
Bă, cred că e unul în spatele nostru.
Da, poate fi. Rămâi să ții vent.
Păi da.
Da.
E dram.
Mă uit în spate, cred că e în spate, dacă e la double.
Dead
Nice.
one, dead.
Can we come ram, guys?
Da.
I have siege. Am eu siege. Red, poți să faci pick la mine. Ține-mi. N-ai făcut.
Liber rampe.
Trebuie să-i ventul, mă, nebunule. Bă, ești
Liber,
nebun, gen.
Top side.
Hai, bă, sus. Stelă.
Low.
Single. Double. Double last.
Double last. Mamă, ce rundă. Nu știu. Trebuia să ne
Rămâneam în
ieșim.
vent, n-aveau nicio șansă la rundă.
Au bătut omul în rampă, am crezut că nu mai e asta secret, că ai și bătut unul secret jos, au bătut unul în rampă. Aoleu. Mă duc să-l bat pe ăla la ușă, nu mă bloca să va.
Spargi tu singur?
Nu sparg, îmi deschid ușa manual. Nu pot să cred, trebuia să ieșim și noi, mă, să ies ăla, da, bă.
Looks a bit late.
I don't see outside. I think vent already one, I think.
Poți să-mi dai flash? De să-mi dai. Mă bag aici.
Ready.
Credit.
Can we go ram, guys, can we come ram? After the zone. I pressure a bit, wait. Wait.
Double box. Down ramp.
You can go heaven, I think.
Ramp still.
Try to go heaven together and split it.
1 HP. You can just kill him.
Kill him.
Îți doi jos.
Let's go now, man.
One more down.
One more for sure. I have single.
Double one.
Nu la geam.
I fake one.
Bravo, bă, Seba.
Mă, ce le trag.
Behind! Mamă, n-a shot ăsta aici. Bravo, Seba. They are low on money, guys.
Ce e tras sau? În fine, ce atacă ne auzim.